Hello, everybody, and welcome to Perspectives. And today, we have a most unusual get-together, and I promise you, the news is marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. As a matter of fact, the news you're going to hear today on Perspectives is something we're all proud of. This morning, Chief Hoskin, Principal Chief of the Cherokee Nation, presented Rogers State University Public TV a grant in the amount of $100,000. Now, this money will be used by RSU TV to develop a third channel dedicated to distance learning. This new distance learning classroom, known as DLC, will deliver teacher-led accredited concurrent college telecourses approved by Rogers State University. This digital classroom will provide access to higher education opportunities for school juniors and seniors who want to get their college careers started. Classes to be offered are psychology, American government, college algebra, and the Cherokee language.
We work so well with the university on a variety of projects, not the least of which is some really important work in Cherokee language preservation. Of course, RSU provides a language class in Cherokee, but that is just the beginning of talking about the partnership. It goes on and on through all of the people that come here on a Cherokee Nation scholarship to the various other ways that we partner. And so when we were allocating our ARPA funds just a little over a year ago, Councilman Keith Austin came to us and said, look, you've got to remember our higher education partners, and please remember Rogers State University. And I just know no one is going to spend this $100,000 better, more effectively, and in a way that helps students better than Rogers State University.
Please know that we recognize and appreciate the loyal and generous partnership with the Cherokee Nation. We couldn't do what we do without our partnership with the Cherokee Nation, and the Chief alluded to this wonderful grant that going to present us a check for in just a few minutes, and we'll ask Royal Ailes to talk a little bit more about that. Royal Ailes, General Manager of RSU TV.
This is a great day for RSU and a great day for RSU Public TV. By making this a isolated distance learning channel, it helps us across many levels. But really what got this started was bringing together the Cherokee language and putting it on broadcast television so the community out there can learn the language. And having this channel dedicated for not just Cherokee language, but for other concurrent classes that the university offers for freshmen and sophomores, or for juniors and seniors to get their career started in college is fantastic. I am so excited, and we are so blessed to have the support of the Cherokee Nation and Chief Hoskins.
General Manager Royal Ailes says the Channel 35.3 should be up and airing by the end of the year. Earlier this year, Chief Hoskin held the United Nations International Decade of Indigenous Languages in Tahlequah. That three-day event featured language leaders from around the world, information, and best practices to, preserve all of the languages. I'm joined now by my friend, Cherokee Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be back in person, in studio.
Good to see you. Yeah, no mask.
Right.
Terrific get-together.
Yes, sir.
Lots of things going on that I want to try to talk to you about. And as a matter of fact, we normally take a break in the middle of this show, but I think today we're going to bypass that break to just so we can get more information from you involved here. Preservation of the language is very important to you, as it is for a great many people within the tribe and outside of the tribe,
right? Because
we're seeing it die off. And every time an old one dies, as the saying goes, the library burns. So what are your hopes and dreams to preserve it?
Well, my hopes and dreams are that a generation from now we're not in a crisis, which we are now, in terms of the Cherokee language being at risk of us losing it. So in a generation, more Cherokee speakers being created through fluency programs every year than we're losing. We're losing more now than we're creating. So in a generation, I think about my daughter, her growing up in a world in which the Cherokee language is spoken more in a natural, organic form throughout our reservation and beyond. That's going to take a great deal of work, because right now, Sam, as you suggested in your opening comments, we're in a crisis in the Cherokee language, but we have a plan, and I think it'll be effective.
You know, I was really encouraged by the news just the other day of a young Cherokee woman who is recording an album in Cherokee for the public as well as for the people. This is the sort of thing that we need to see more of: involvement by the people, innovation by the people. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, and that's what it's going to take. I mean, it's certainly indispensable to this effort that we do things like translate documents, teach people in classrooms. But what really excites me is examples that you just cited, which is somebody producing creative content, in this case, a music album in Cherokee. That shows that this is taking root, or the roots are sort of expanding out into the community. That's how we're going to save it. It won't necessarily be saved by people in government office buildings in Tahlequah saying we need to save it. It's going to be saved because the people want it. We just have to give them the resources and, in some cases, the inspiration to get it done. You
recently signed a measure, and I'm going to read this to make sure I get it correct. It's a new law earmarking $15 million over a 3-year period to build a new drug treatment facility. Can you explain your vision on this one?
Well, for the longest time, Native health care in this country was delivered by the federal government. In the last 30 plus years, and Chief Mankiller was really instrumental in this, we've really taken control of our own health care destiny. But as we look at the expansive Cherokee Nation health system, we see some gaps. And one area in which there's a gap is mental health, and more specifically, addiction treatment. The addiction problem has been with us throughout society for a long time, but certainly Cherokee people are affected by it. The opioid industry in particular has done great injury. And I think what is so pleasing to me about this legislation that you mentioned is the $15 million over the next 3 years to build our first, we don't have one, our first drug treatment center is being built by the opioid industry. How did we do it? We took them to court. We held them accountable. We had such a strong case, Sam, that we reached a settlement, a multi-year settlement, and we're earmarking funds to do that. So it's some justice, a measure of justice that they will pay for the damage they've done, but we will be the ones bringing the healing through our own drug treatment
I think
center.
it's a marvelous move on your part. Now, that money, nobody can touch it.
Right.
That is a locked-in figure.
It is. We've locked down the $15 million. There's more money coming in. I mean, we had a second settlement earlier this year. The settlement from which we get the $15 million was last year, and we have more litigation still out there. So as we get these dollars rolling in, we're going to plow them directly into ways to heal people from this opioid epidemic. I mean, in addition to the drug treatment program, we've started a harm reduction program. Sam, there are people that are right now users of drugs, and you have to find them where they are. And you have to help them. You have to help them lead as healthy a life as possible and hopefully find a path to recovery. So we're really taking an all-of-the-above approach to try to help our people deal with this epidemic.
You are my friend, and I will still always refer to you as Chief. I will always call you Chief. You just call me for dinner. That's all you have to worry about. But I will tell you, many years ago, when I started shooting works down in Cherokee Nation, I was taken by some of the people to what they call the outback of Cherokee land. I was shown treble hooks hanging at eye level. I was shown rattlesnakes in boxes with a tripwire, where if you tripped the wire, the rattlesnake popped out on you walking the trail. And the point was to keep you from seeing the marijuana fields that were being utilized illegally on Cherokee land, and it's happening everywhere, or was back then. Those things are pretty well eradicated now, aren't they?
They are, in part because Cherokee Nation government is exercising more control over our resources, our land, what goes on in our reservation. I mean, just recently I signed a measure that sets aside some of our land for traditional medicinal healing plants. And so that's the kind of activities we're engaged in. Our law enforcement apparatus is so much more robust today than it was during the time you're talking about, to the extent that we're really the leaders in whether it's law enforcement, whether it's preserving lands. People look to us as leaders, and I think we're doing so responsibly. And the result of which is some of those issues that you encountered don't exist like they did at that time.
That'd be good in a museum.
It would be.
You know, and I have to tell you, I learned some valuable lessons when I worked with the people. because they took me in, they taught me the ways of things that most of us take for granted, growing in the woods, growing around trees, growing under bushes that can be used for medicine naturally. And you don't need opioids.
That's a true statement. I was visiting with some of these elders this morning, and we were talking about that very subject. And actually, the documentary you produced years and years ago was something we talked about, because you filmed that at a time when there was so much more of that knowledge out there, quite honestly. Now we're realizing we've lost a really precious resource in the Cherokee Nation. That's a human resource. That's these people who have kept our lifeways alive. Many of them are on in years. So what we've done in recent years is recognize that and realize that if we're going to keep this knowledge alive, that's knowledge of medicinal plants and ways to heal ourselves that it doesn't require those sort of pharmaceuticals we were talking about earlier, that we need to visit with these elders, learn from them, and we're doing that, and I think we're doing it to good results.
One thing I've noticed about Cherokee Nation, you haven't limited your spending to just the tribe, to the people. You've helped public education as well throughout Oklahoma. What's going on there?
Well, we've helped them for a long time, and I think it's a recognition that if we are going to be a strong Cherokee Nation, we have to have strong communities. And if people think about objectively what makes a strong community, there are a number of ingredients, not the least of which is strong public education. Now, look, in this state, for a long period of time, really for the better part of a decade, the state of Oklahoma seemed to retreat from funding public education, in part because they'd eroded revenues so much that they really had to. We stepped in, and every year we've contributed millions of dollars. So this last year, just recently, we issued a check for $7.5 million. I should say checks, because 107 public school districts received sort of a pro rata share that they could spend any way they want to. And if you talk to teachers and school board members and superintendents, they'll tell you that sometimes it means doing some deferred maintenance on an old school building. Sometimes it means keeping a robotics program that might have been on the chopping block, and you hate to think about that for kids who need exposure to STEM programs. Sure. Sometimes it means keeping a teacher that might have been laid off. I've always thought that if the state and the tribes were sort of rowing in the same direction in sort of a robust effort to fund public education, we could be the envy of the country. We still can. There's enough resources in the state to do it. That's the state's business. As far as Cherokee Nation is concerned, we're going to continue to not only issue those checks every year to public schools, we do a lot of other things. We're involved in STEM programs. I just visited Kenwood School the other day, a little town in Delaware County. They're going to the World Robotics Championship, Sam.
No kidding.
And their robotics program started years ago, and we helped them do it. We're helping them get to the World Championship. Those are the stories you want to see, because you know those young people have a better shot at getting jobs in the world that we live in today, and you got to have that kind of education.
Well, you just gave me something I've got to jump in. I can't not do it. That means what you're telling me is these kids have to have access to the internet.
Absolutely.
They have to have 5G when they can get it.
Right.
Is the coverage of the internet where you want it?
Not even close. You know, Eastern Oklahoma is ranks high or low, whichever is the low score on connectivity, whether it's broadband, whether it's cell coverage, and we've got to make a big investment in it. We're doing it. I think the state is poised to do it, and that's good news because there's a lot more resources coming out to do it. I mentioned the town of Kenwood. The town of Kenwood is an example of a town, and people need to know this, where there really isn't much cell coverage, let alone good broadband. So you're talking about kids that deserve a shot to get an education that will equip them for the 21st century, and yet it doesn't even seem like the 21st century when you try to make a phone call. What are we doing? We're going to invest in broadband there. We're going to make sure that community and the people that live there have a shot at living in this 21st century economy. But it's not just there. That's just a great example. So across our reservation, we're looking for those gaps. We're trying to fill those gaps. We've done it in small ways, helping students with little devices, MiFi devices during the pandemic so they could connect with school. But we're going to carry that forward into bigger ideas about cell towers, about stringing fiber optic and working with the state and our other partners. We're going to get this done, and if we don't get it done, it means we'll have a generation that is shortchanged, and we can't do that because we're shortchanging ourselves.
No, you're absolutely right. And I would think, too, when the pandemic hit, it only served to point out the need for that change.
It did. It really revealed these gaps because you had young people learning from home. They couldn't connect to their school. And we distributed these MiFi boxes to thousands of kids and made a difference. We would find, though, some kids who couldn't connect to that cell signal you need for that box so you can get on and do your homework. That told us we've got a lot more work to do than we ever imagined, but we're going to get it done.
Cherokee Nation Career Readiness Act. Mm-hmm. Recently, the people spent $29 million.
Right.
$29 million. That's a lot of change right there over a 3-year period. Why?
Well, the reason we did it is because we were already spending a great deal on college scholarships. So every year about $15 million to help our people go to college. But the truth of the matter is a lot of jobs don't require a college degree, but every job that you can make a living in really requires something beyond high school. What does it require? It requires some kind of career training. So we've equipped our people to go to really any career tech they want to go to and go get that education. I just recently went to our lineman graduation. We created a whole program to help people go be linemen to string fiber optic to help spread that broadband or do the more conventional electric, and we've got to upgrade the grid in this country, so there's plenty of work to do. And so we're talking about young people and some people in the middle of their careers going to get some training for a few months. We paid for it, but it's going to change their lives. That's one example, but we're doing this across the spectrum of career readiness. There's a lot of healthcare jobs that are in high demand. We need a lot of them in our health system. It makes sense to train our own people. We need to have Cherokees working for Cherokees. The way to do that is through career readiness, and that's the purpose of that act.
What an innovative setup that would be. Mm-hmm. Marvelous. And at the time, it's desperately needed.
It is.
I know there was a time, too, not that long ago, when the nation appeared to be, on the outside, floundering in terms of business opportunities, and a lot of members of the tribe were leaving, going to other states to try to find work. Now they seem to be coming back because of innovative programs such as what you just mentioned.
It is. You know, the reason that here shortly I'll be going to California to visit with Cherokees is because there's 20,000 Cherokees out there. Why is that? For a lot of historic reasons, not the least of which has been economic opportunity or lack of opportunity at different generations, different points in history. So we saw an exodus of a lot of Cherokees over the course of the 20th century. Here in the 21st century, starting to see that trend reverse. You know, we're working with partners to go into places like Mid-America Industrial Park and make it really attractive for capital investment by bringing child care and housing into the area. We ourselves, through our own businesses, have a billion-dollar corporation that's not just involved in gaming, but we're involved in a host of other businesses that's really making, I think, this generation of Cherokees be the first generation in maybe forever who have said, we want to come back to Cherokee Nation, even though our parents and grandparents had to leave for economic opportunity. That makes me feel good because it means that our future is so much more secure than our past. I mean, this generation of Cherokees really has a shot at having a higher standard of living of any Cherokees ever and coming back home. And that's what we want. We want them to come home. We've got to give them a reason to come home.
You know, I just recently came across this figure, and again, it's a high dollar amount. I did not know about this. $120 million for the expansion of affordable housing, low-income home repairs, and other housing needs for Cherokee families. I mentioned to you before we started, I remember the day when some of the people lived in homes with dirt floors, but they made me welcome. I ate with them, I stayed with them, I got to know them, I knew their children, and some of the children have grown, and now they're working for you. The changes are marked. Does more need to be done in this area?
It does. And so the $120 million really meets a few objectives. One of the objectives, though, is to address problems that still exist among particularly some of our elders who live in circumstances that you and I would not want to live in, and we may take for granted that our roof's not going to leak and our floor's not going to fall in. They don't. That's something they live with every day, and you know, every elder in this country ought to live in dignity. When we're talking about Cherokee elders and the responsibility we have, we said we're going to take about $30 million out of that $120 million and make sure we repair as many homes as possible. And this does a couple of things. It, number one, helps the elders. Many of them are Cherokee speakers, by the way, and we're actually going out to find them. You know, you went out and visited with those families. We're sending out some of our language speakers and learners to their homes to talk about what's going on, because many of those elders are not coming into our offices. They're very proud people. They don't want to come in and ask for help. We go ask them, can we help? So that's a $30 million chunk of that $120 million. But the other part is this: when we talk about the topics you and I have talked about, part of which is building hope and opportunity and building up this economy, you can't do it if you don't address affordable housing. And there is a lack of affordable housing in this state, in this region, frankly, in this country, and it's driving things like rent through the roof. It's making homes hard to find. So we're going to build homes, and hundreds of homes, so that this generation that can come home or can stay home and raise families, they have a place to call home. We have to build those homes. This isn't free homes. They have skin in the game, but we're setting up in a way that'll be sustainable for generations to come. I'm really excited about this because I think it will show the country, it will certainly show the state, that we're doing our part to address something that we all have to deal with, and that is a lack of affordable housing.
You know, it's funny. I recall somebody who means a lot to me once used the line that there are Cherokee people who don't beat the drum for the almighty dollar. They take care of their own and they teach others to do the same.
Right.
It becomes a very large family the closer you get. And the more the need, the more the closeness. Right. That hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. I mean, as big as Cherokee Nation has gotten in terms of, if you measure our economic impact, which is over $2 billion a year, you measure our workforce, which is about 11,000 people. I mean, that's mind-boggling to me. We're still a collection of families that were removed from our homelands in the southeastern part of the United States in the 19th century, and we're still together, and we still sort of know each other in a real way. We know each other, or we know our families, or we know our communities. That smallness is really important to the Cherokee Nation because it's small in a very good and glorious way. No matter how big we get, we're still Cherokee people. We still have this connection. And I think as long as we have that balance, the Cherokee Nation will be strong. But we've got a lot of work to do to make improvements, but I think we're doing it.
A couple of personal questions. You can't go anywhere in Cherokee Nation without being recognized. And generally, you got somebody around you. You got people that are taking notes or making suggestions or whatever.
Yeah.
But do you ever just kind of, after dinner some night, slip out, tell the family I'll be back in a day or two, and do you ever just go out and visit the people?
Well, I do get a chance to go out a lot without a lot of fanfare. Lately, we've been getting out to community meetings, which is a lot of fanfare, but sometimes afterwards we'll stick around and talk to people one-on-one. That is a more, I think, a meaningful exchange than I normally get. But, you know, I live in a world in which I can go anywhere to visit with Cherokee people in all sorts of settings. I mean, I mentioned that Kenwood robotics team the other day. Going to the school and visiting with those 4 students on the side with the cameras off, talking about why they were in the robotics program. Number one, they thought it was cool. Number two, they wanted to do that for a living in some way. I mean, that's kind of exchange that really pumps you up and reminds you, hey, this is why I want to be chief, because these young people want a shot and you can help them get there. So I find ways to connect with people. I love this job, Sam, and wouldn't trade anything for the world.
You bring honor to it.
Thank you.
And you bring honor to the tribe. Thank you for taking time to visit with me.
Thank you.
And thank you for fielding the questions that I sometimes threw out in a sloppy manner. But you understand how I work.
You're getting the hang of it, Sam. No, you're doing great. I appreciate it.
Anyway, you take care of you. And perhaps sometime down the road, we'll break bread together.
That'd be wonderful.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Will do.
You. And we're all out of time. Thank you for joining us today on this wonderful, wonderful get-together of all the good news that's coming to Rogers State Public Television. Stay tuned. You're going to see some changes.